Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. On this episode, we have a long overdue segment. We are going to do a deck tech on cEDH's most complicated and also most underrated, according to my opinions, deck in the format. We're going to be breaking down Tayam the Luminous Enigma. Now, this is a deck that I have been talking about for a while. I've been saying it's underrated for quite some time, and then the fantastic pilots of this deck have started absolutely confirming my biases and started putting up really good numbers with this lately, including our special guest today, Tayam expert Pixel Store One, also known as Pixel. How are you doing, friend?
Hello. Yeah, so I'm Pixel. I might be known as with Tuukka as the Tayam twins, and we've essentially are the two people who kind of picked up Tayam like 3 years ago at this point,
Yeah.
and just initially when we picked this up, and it kind of did everything that we wanted the deck to do, or everything that we liked in Magic,
Mm-hmm.
and it's in like instant speed interaction, stacks, and like these unique combo lines that layer on top of each other
Mm-hmm.
rather than being always linear.
Mm-hmm. And also, you have a couple numbers with this deck, right? Yeah, no, you've at least made one top 16 with it before, correct?
Yeah, yeah, well, I've been kind of running it down, but Tuukka has better performances. I
Mm-hmm.
actually like it that it's a lot better. It's not centralized. It's actually a lot of just now Clams took out another top 16
Mm-hmm.
last Mox Masters.
Yeah.
So it's not that Tuukka and I are like dominating the meta with
Mm-hmm.
our piloting skills. It's actually showing that the list actually performs
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
with also good pilots. Like it's able to give the pilot what it wants. It's not just the pilot.
Yeah, anytime a deck is putting up results with not just like the people who have specialized in it, but other people, it's usually indicative that the deck is actually doing really well. I talk about that with Tivit a lot too.
Yeah.
So let's break down the deck a little bit. So I'm going to read the commander for everybody to start things off, and then we'll go from there. So Tayam the Luminous Enigma is a 1 in Abzan for a 3/3 legendary nightmare beast. Each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it, which means the creature has vigilance. And then for 3 generic mana, remove 3 counters from among creatures you control. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, then return a permanent card with converted mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, as we can see here, a lot of free value with creatures entering the battlefield and an activated ability that does have the requirement of counters, but then allows you to really just start, reanimating a lot of things and also provides value because it doesn't just reanimate things, it also puts cards in the graveyard to be reanimated later. As, observant people could notice, if you have infinite counters and infinite mana, you actually can proceed to put your entire graveyard into your library, which is obviously very strong, and we'll definitely go over the combos there. But we're going to
Do
jump
you
over
mind?
to your Mox Field right now where we can see a list of several cards that are pretty important to the deck, and we're going to break those down.
This is something that I usually do in our Discord server because I will presume that this video will help a lot of people pick up the deck, but it's not gonna make you a master it overnight. And
Mm-hmm.
I do recommend people who are interested to join our server, ask questions, and if they're interested, we do like weekly coaching sessions where we just talk about the deck and
Wow.
educate newer players.
That's really awesome. Yeah, so definitely for those interested, I will leave a link to the TIM server down in the description of this video so that, you can go where the experts are, right? As you mentioned, you and your brother have been working this deck for 3 years. There's tons of other pilots who I know have been in there for a long time, and you're willing to help new players, which is very generous of your time and very exciting. So cool stuff.
Okay. First, basic theory. The way that I would view this deck is a combination of Winota, which you know how it works, and Inala. So it's Winota because we're a creature stacks oriented list that uses its commander to put accumulating pieces on top of each other to
Yeah.
attempt to hit critical mass.
Mm-hmm.
We're also in our deck because we use convoluted Tudor chains with reanimation to find 3 to 4 piece combos that allows us to go infinite.
Yeah.
Now I can go over the basic combo, or the one that I like to teach people, because it's the simplest. It's the one that allows the player to truly grasp what the deck is about. Which is, so this is the recruiter pile, and I'm gonna go over the ranger pile later. So what the recruiter pile is just an assortment of, well, tolerable chains that you can find with, or you can loop recruiter to find a linear, like, it's not definitive, it's, well, it's like you can find your infinite with just recruiter of the card.
Yeah. So it's as you mentioned, the comparison to Inala. This is your spell seeker in a sense.
Yeah, that's the perfect or clearest explanation that I can give. So let's say you have infinite mana. So because realistically this loop is gonna cost you 16 mana, which
16. Okay.
I know it sounds a lot,
Oh,
but
but
not
I've
gonna
played
lie.
against this deck so many times. You get mana like
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Like we can loop Cradle, we can do whatever we want to get mana. So let's say you have infinite mana and you get Recruiter. You first find Carrion Feeder so you can sacrifice your Recruiter of the card and you
Okay.
play your Carrion Feeder.
Yep.
Now you have essentially 2 counters, but you can also sacrifice any creature that you might have on the battlefield.
Right,
So
to get
you
another one.
can, yeah. So now you have 3 counters. So you activate Tayam, and now you have an activation on the stack. You hold priority and you sacrifice your recruiter of the card.
Yep.
Now you let your ability resolve and you mill 3. And to make it simple, you just take back the recruiter of the card.
Gotcha.
Then you get Rishkar or Strangleroot. Now both are fine. They have different return rates based on your board state, but I do recommend that you get Rishkar, because if you have few creatures with counters on them, you're gonna get more mana.
Okay.
You might even net mana by getting Rishkar.
Gotcha.
Once you've gotten Rishkar, now you need to loop Recruiter once more. You activate Tayam, hold priority, sacrifice Recruiter, return Recruiter, and then you find Strangleroot Geist.
Yep.
And once you've gotten Strangleroot Geist, this is an infinite board state.
Okay.
And what I'm gonna execute now is a different like wording, what we call a floating loop, like locally. And it's a floating loop because the loop needs that you have 1 mana floating. So let's say your Tayam has no summoning sickness and you can tap Tayam for 1 mana.
Okay.
And Strangleroot Guys has vigilance. So what you need to do is you tap Strangleroot Guys. You have 2
To be
mana.
clear, it has vigilance because of the counter from Tayam, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do need to like track all of these, but yeah, Strangleroot has vigilance, so you can tap it for mana because Rishkar allows you to tap each creature you control with a counter on it.
Yeah. Interesting that it says a counter and not just 1/1 counter. Definitely.
Yeah. Also, you might not believe this, but Strangleroot does in fact have haste. It is very surprising, but like every 5th coaching session, people ask, how do I tap the Strangleroot guys?
Yep.
It has 2 very relevant keywords. And then once you've tapped your Strangleroot guys, you sack it to your Carrion Feeder.
Okay.
Now, this is infinite. Carrion Feeder and an Undying creature is infinite counters because Carrion Feeder gets the +1, and Strangleroot or the Young Wolf gets a +1 and a Vigilance. So this is 3 counters, and then you tap your Strangleroot guys, and then you have 3 mana. And now you put an activation on the stack. Now, what you need to do is hold priority and sacrifice Strangleroot Geist again. And it's refreshed because you remove the +1 counter with your Tayam.
Yep.
Yeah. So it returns vigilance and a +1, and you tap it. Now you might notice that you currently have 1 mana floating. Now you can treat this mana as the same as the 1 mana that you had prior to starting the loop.
Okay.
And then once you have the activation on the stack, you sacrifice Strangleroot Geist, and it doesn't return because it has the +1 counter. Now your time activation resolves, and you return your Strangleroot Geist with the time ability.
Yeah.
And now you can notice that you have the same exact board state that you had prior, except you have milled 3 cards and you've accumulated some excess amount of counters, but those aren't exactly relevant.
Yeah.
So with this loop, you can mill your entire library.
Mm-hmm.
And with the last iteration, or until you've iterated the loop long enough that you've hit your Lion's Eye diamond, you don't sacrifice Strangleroot Geist on the last activation, like on below that, on top of the activation, and you get back Lion's Eye diamond.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and when you get Lion's Eye diamond, this board state is maintained, which means you're netting 1 mana,
Mm-hmm.
sacrificing Lion's Eye diamond for 3, and that's 4 mana, which means now all of your activations are netting 1 mana. So you
Mm.
get infinite counters and infinite mana. Once
Gotcha.
you've done that, you can perform any of your kill conditions. This comes in many forms. You have a lot of decisions. The clearest one that we recommend that you might start out with is Moonglove Extract, because it's a very simple
Yeah.
deal
Deal
2
two
damage to
damage
target player.
infinitely. Right.
Yeah, and then you shock your opponents.
Yep.
Yeah. So this was the
Are there any other outlets that you would consider like pretty clean, or is Moonglove like the really nice one?
okay. So I guess I can talk about a little bit about theory now.
Yeah.
So I just showcased a linear tutor chain with Tayam, but
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I do wanna be very precise on is that you don't worry about infinite. The infinite will come.
Mm-hmm.
What you really need to do is do correct playing patterns and deck build the deck in a way that your cards do something prior to the infinite.
Okay.
Moonclave Extract seems very unassuming,
Mm-hmm.
but it's exactly what the deck wants because it's get rid of Dorothy, Opposition Agent, and Containment Priest. All
Pretty
three
good ones.
stacks,
Yeah.
yeah, like all of those pieces hoses Tayam, and Moonclave Extract gets rid of it.
Yeah.
Something else that I don't think is in the database list, but
Mm-hmm.
is a good option is White Bloom Adventurer. Yeah, so White Bloom Adventurer uh, has the key piece of untapping before the infinite, and
Mm-hmm.
after the infinite, it has the key dungeon trigger of trap, which is target opponent or target player loses 5 life. So you can
Yeah.
just loop the White Bloom Adventurer infinitely.
That's pretty spicy.
So yeah, so it doesn't really matter what you kill your opponents with, it matters what you do before you kill them with
Mm-hmm.
the specific piece. So that's
Gotcha.
why Blood Artist or anything, all of these kind of things that people usually play for kill conditions are big no-no, because
Mm-hmm.
a Blood Artist does nothing before the infinite.
Right. It's just like dead weight in the deck. Like for example, anyone who's followed me talking about Dawnmaker for years, there's so many cards people ask about things like Thassa's Oracle, and it's like great that ends the game cleanly, but it's super unnecessary because the card quality is so low.
Oh yeah, like there's a lot of decks that still play like Thassa's Oracle,
Yeah.
even though there's no consultation.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Now, and for example, like we just talked about Moonglove Extract, right? It is also a removal spell, so things like that take much higher priority than something that's just like a kill condition.
Yeah, so in Tayam, because like you really want your cards to be multifunctional,
Yeah.
because that's how you get the highest like card EV. You
Yeah.
don't get card EV by your cards being good. You get EV by getting the like grinding the maximum out of them.
Makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
This was the basic loop.
Mm-hmm.
If I can go over the other loop now,
Yeah, that'd be great.
the second loop is, or the second pile is Ranger pile,
Mm-hmm.
which is you can perform by Ranger Captain of Eos. Ranger Captain of Eos is not deterministic. Recruiter of the card is a deterministic combo.
Sure.
Ranger Captain of Eos is not deterministic.
Okay.
But what it is a massive powerhouse of a card, as you might know, that
Yeah.
you can loop Ranger to silence lock your opponents.
Right. So I want to interject here. One of the things that like turned me on to Tayam the first time that I like found out about this deck and like saw it actually do well was that I was playing against it and my opponents straight up could not handle the fact that they were just getting ranger looped. It was not winning the game per se, but a ranger captain of Eos every single turn, or at least like two or three of them even, was just ensuring that there was absolutely nothing those players could do, especially because most of them were like on these more turbo slanted decks, right? So the ranger looping is like, in my opinion, one of Tayam's biggest assets.
Oh yeah, like Ranger is one of the best cards in Tayam.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is like Recruiter is good linear,
Yeah.
but as I said about you want your cards to be multifaceted,
Yeah.
Ranger is exactly what you want. With the Recruiter pile, what you actually want to first get is an Icathian money changer with your first tutor.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, if you have the Ranger,
So as we can see, right, we talked about in the last combo how important counters are, right? So this one drop comes in with 3 counters on it and a lot of, useless text. So I guess sacrificing itself is not bad.
yeah. One thing to note is
Mm-hmm.
that if there is a Husbringer or anything that stops the ATP, it will stop the damage trigger, but it does not stop the counters because it enters with the 3 credit
Right,
counters on it.
right. Like a clone per se, right?
Yeah, the sacrifice has some unique playing
Mm-hmm.
patterns. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
hurt that it's there, but
Yeah.
I don't really use it that much.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, you get because you if you were to get Karen Feeder first with Ranger Captain of
Yeah.
EOS, well now you have 2 counters. You might have to sacrifice your something on your board like a Monadork, and you
Yeah.
really don't want to do that. You want to
Okay.
preserve your board state because later on I can show like how this deck is highly dependent on you preserving your board state
Right.
to like stack up your Cradle and Crypto right or even your Riskan. So you don't want to do that. You first want to get your Icathian Money Changer as this sort of a buffer because when you get Icathian Money Changer, that's 4 counters. You activate
Right.
Tayam, you can sacrifice the Ranger as a silence and then return it back, and then you can find Karen Feeder,
Mm-hmm.
which is the sacrifice outlet, and
Yep.
then you can find Young Wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the infinite counters. With
Yeah.
infinite counters, now for 3 mana, you can silence one of your opponents, which is insane.
Yeah.
Uh, and now you're just looking for your infinite mana
Mana. Yeah.
output, yeah, which is the Lionside Diamond or the Gaia's Cradle.
Mm-hmm.
And with the last piece that you might need for your like Ranger pile is the Sylvan Safekeeper,
Yeah.
because you can sacrifice the Gaia's Cradle
Mm-hmm.
and then return it back with the time activation.
Exactly.
So again, once again, multifaceted.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvan Safekeeper is a combo piece plus a protection
Yeah.
piece. Everything kind of is interwoven,
Mm-hmm.
and you really need to think about what your card choices do for you in
Yeah.
the deck.
I have to say, Ranger Captain plus Sylvan is already just an insane combo in the format. In Tayam, the ability to have that protection plus the ability to recur any of these pieces if they finally break through that lock is just, it's crazy. Like it legitimately is one of the hardest locks to break through as far as like self protection and silence effects every turn. Absolutely. And also, I want to say for the people at home, because I know a lot of people tend to, especially in a deck like this where there's a lot of moving pieces, it may look like these piles are they are, as we mentioned, multiple moving pieces, but as we noticed, like you just mentioned, all of these start with only a single creature, right? These tutors that get more tutors that get more tutors, and that's what Time does. It provides you that engine, and a lot of these combos sort of also just self-assemble because the deck plays some really solid stacks pieces that like allow you to have the time to let these engines assemble, and meanwhile you're doing crazy stuff like reoccurring your stacks pieces over and over again, right? Like the amount of times I've had to like go for a lethal tutor against a Tayam deck, I've had to bounce opposition agent, but then they have enough mana to flash it back or enough mana to, if I kill it, just bring it back onto the battlefield. That play pattern happens a lot with this deck, and it's one of the reasons why assembling these like multifaceted combos, these combos that require a lot of different pieces, it's not actually as big of an ask as it may seem because of the fact that the deck provides you enough time and breaks parity on certain effects so well.
Now I've gone more over the like linear playing patterns, and now I can talk more about what once you know these tutorable chains, now we can talk about like the non-linear parts of the deck,
Okay.
which is what you're pulling realistically from your activations, because you're not always pulling your recruiter and ranger
Yeah.
to go infinite. What you're pulling is this half. You need to make your own infinites essentially.
Yeah.
Should I first talk about mulligans in terms of what you're actually aiming for to get those board states, or
Yeah, I think
the
that's
card
actually a really
choices?
good idea. Yeah, let's start with some mulligans, talk about things that what we're looking for in the deck,
Okay,
and then talk about pieces like that.
okay. So the best card in the deck, Wall of Roots.
Mm-hmm.
The literal cornerstone Tayam would make half as less sense if Wall of Roots didn't exist.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. One cool interaction that first I should explain is that what you can do with Tayam, and this is one of the only Magic the Gathering interactions that I know, is that you can activate Wall of Roots by putting it to 5, and it stays alive, because what you need to essentially do is you declare that you want to activate Tayam. The game essentially asks that you pay for your costs, and then you pay it in the way that it asks you to pay it. You activate Wall,
Right.
which is
Right.
a mana ability,
Mm-hmm.
which is 3 mana,
Mm-hmm.
and then the 3 counters immediately.
Yeah.
And then the ability is put on the stack.
Mm-hmm.
And after that ability is on the stack, the state-based actions are checked, and then you have the activation, and Wall of Roots is healthy.
Okay. Yeah, let's I just want to break that down for people at home. So that's a really interesting interaction, and I actually did not know about that, but that's really cool. So for those who don't know, the way mana abilities works is if you declare that you're putting an ability. So if you were just to say I'm going to put a 0/1 counter on Wall of Roots and I'm going to make a green mana, if it's your fifth, the card would just die. But as Pixel just mentioned there, because of the way Magic sequencing works and state-based actions are checked, which is basically what checks the card's working, right? And what checks if something dies, right? Like if you lightning bolt something with 3 toughness, it doesn't technically die. The state-based action gets checked, then it dies, right? And that's kind of how the game is broken down. So with the way this works, because you are paying the cost of an ability, by the time the ability resolves, you are paying the cost fully. So the cost being the counters and the mana, but because you're paying it all at once, by the time the ability actually resolves, you do not have -5 on the toughness of this creature. So that's a really interesting interaction.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm rather scatterbrained
No,
till
no,
3
no.
a.m.
It's okay.
So
It's just it's a really hard interaction to understand. I just want to make sure we went through that super
yeah,
clearly.
yeah. One thing I do want to preface is that I used to be rather like coy about this, like, oh, it could never be a thing. But realistically, now I can say this, that Tayam realistically is one of the hardest decks in Magic the Gathering.
Oh
Not in
yeah,
cEDH, but as in Magic the Gathering.
I
You need,
wholeheartedly agree.
yeah, you need, like, if you can play Tayam,
Hmm.
you can play Gitrog, you can play Krarkran Ironworks, and everything difficult deck.
Yeah,
Because, well, Tuukka and I are practically like tier 2 judges. We constantly have to, like, well, not overrule, we're respectful, but we have to say to some judges that it actually works this way,
yeah,
because you need to know a lot of rulings.
yeah.
Like, yeah, and holding priority and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So with the
Hmm.
Wall of Roots interaction, now we can get to the mulligans, which
Hmm.
is yeah, this is okay. So yeah, so this is some I haven't. I actually took a rather long break from time, so I still have a hard time reading mulligans. I'm pretty sure this is a turn 3 activation with a turn 2 dismember open,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
I'm not mistaken. So how you play this handout is that, okay, turn 1 you draw, you play your Whirly Tutor, and you get your Wall of Roots,
Hmm.
and you play your Jewel Lotus.
Yeah.
Next turn you fetch up let's say a Bayou, and now you have your Wall of Roots turn 2. This is the key piece that you're aiming for. You're
Right.
aiming for Wall of Roots on turn 2,
Hmm.
so that usually you're pairing this with a Mana Crypt, actually,
Hmm.
because let's say if this was a Mana Crypt, you would go your third land drop and your 3 land drops and Wall of Roots and Tayam
Hmm.
is the activation.
Yeah.
And if this was a Mana Crypt, now you would have an activation on your opponent's turn.
Yeah. That's pretty solid.
Yeah. And, like, some people might say it's like 7 mana to get a time activation out, but
Hmm.
because the deck is built for it, it's surprisingly consistent to get a
Yeah.
turn 3 activation out.
Yeah.
Because, like, all you need to find is in your mulligan, if you have a 3 lands, an Enlightened Tutor, and a Final of Devastation, that's a turn 3 activation.
Yeah.
Because you get Mana Crypt, turn 2
Hmm.
Final of Devastation for Fall,
Right.
and then you play Wall. And you might notice that a lot of these mulligans are actually dependent on you hitting your third land drop, which is the reason why we run 32 lands minus Dread Arbor, because it's not great. But yeah.
So you are, sorry to be clear, you are on Dryad Arbor, but you do not count it towards your land drops. That
Yeah, it's not really a land. It is a land, but it's more like once
combo
you've
piece.
got your
Yeah.
not really a combo piece, but
Oh,
let's
okay.
say you have an activation
Yeah.
and you hit a fetch.
Yeah.
And you would be passing to your turn, you can just fetch a Dread Arbor and you get an additional counter. So
Right.
it just smoothen these lines.
Yeah. So that's by combo piece, I mean more just like an engine continuer, I guess.
Well, essentially everything in Tayam is a combo piece.
Yeah.
So
That's super fair.
yeah, it's not something to really describe cards by.
Sure.
So yeah, now that I've talked a good amount like mulligans and basic tutor change and linear stuff, I guess we can talk about the non-linears, which is like the cards choices in particular.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so we have a deck pulled up here. We have the list, and then I know there's definitely some pieces in here that people are gonna look at and be like, "What am I looking at?" And then there's some things in here that are gonna be pretty instinctive. So let's go through uh, each thing, and if there's any cards you want to call out in particular as well, I would love for that to happen. So right now I'm checking out the creatures. We've noticed that we talked about undying creatures. So Young Wolf is much like the Strangler Geist we were talking about before. It sort of is one of those quick assemble, get some counters on stuff. Is there any sort of other intricacies to it, or does that basically describe that?
Okay, so I guess I can just start rambling about like random deck building theory, like there's a
Yeah.
matrix fuck ton of it. One thing that Tuukka does want me to preface probably here is that one, we play a lot of stacks. We have like one instant speed interaction.
Yeah.
The deck list is not a stacks list, it's a control list.
Okay.
Because you're actively looking to develop your board state. You're looking for your wall of rules, and then you want to get Tayam out, and you want to control the board with Tayam.
Yeah.
You do play your like early Archons if you have those, but don't mulligan or tutor for stacks pieces.
Okay. So you want to be more proactive as opposed to reactive to your opponents.
Oh yeah, like a lot of board states surprisingly end up as being essentially the aggressor in the game state, because if like a lot of like even against Pro Star Thrashers occasionally if we get an early wall of roots, it's our opponents who are actually attempting to stop us from winning rather than us being the like reactive one.
Okay, cool.
Also on the Young Wolf, so one other deck building theory is the what I essentially call the ratio of 2 or the number of 2, which is you can notice that the deck list runs a lot of a high density
like a redundancy of certain things.
Yeah, a high redundancy of 2 pieces, which is we have 2 Eternal Witnesses, we have 2 Kyrian Rangers, we have 2 Undying Creatures, we have 2 Carrion Feeders. We have all of these pieces numbered into 2, because what we just kind of intuitively figured out is because we want consistency through our random mills, we need 2 pieces of the similar function to get that consistency.
So yeah, let's go through some individual pieces here that I think might not jump out to people. I'm curious, specifically, why are you on the Kyrian Ranger and Scrib Ranger package?
It's just something that we're testing out, like practically all of the cards in the cards that we can find in EDH rec, and then Kyrian and Scribs are the stables of green. And well, essentially we found out that they're just pretty good. Like they allow you to untap your mana dorks at instant speed, which means that you can actually bounce 2 of your forests to untap your mana dork on separate opponent's turn, so you can squeeze out more activations. Now, you might see that might be effectively, you might go down by bouncing 2 lands to get a singular activation, but if you're taking a fetch, you've essentially milled 3 by just losing 1 land drop.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then if that gives you your ranger or your stacks piece out, that
so
allows you to keep your it allows you to keep your engine actually moving.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Bloodfill Connoisseur, I like that a lot. It's a sack outlet. I mean, it's literally just carrion feeder two in the deck, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
just the consistency of two, like I stated.
Yep, yep,
It,
just like we talked about beforehand. The one that really popped out to me, I know I've actually talked to, I believe it was you and your brother in the past about Skullwinder, and that just goes back to the redundancy thing, the double Eternal Witness. You want a second one?
yeah.
Yep.
So Schoolwinder is the better Eternal Witness. I'm pretty sure at this
Whoa.
point, yeah, at this point, I'm pretty sure we would got Eternal Witness before Schoolwinder
Wow, that is
because,
it's a take I don't think a lot of people would expect that.
oh yeah, I have a lot of these takes, and yeah. So essentially, Schoolwinder is the better Eternal Witness, is because if you think about it, we're doing all of these things at instant speed,
Sure.
but we're on absent. We don't have or stack interaction,
Sure. Yeah.
and well, we just found out that if you get a Schoolwinder from your activation,
Mm-hmm.
you get back your Worldly Tutors or even Court of Callings or something like that,
Yeah.
and you do this on top of an ad nauseum or any key piece that might put one of your opponents ahead,
Mm-hmm.
and you can let one of the other blue players get a counterspell back.
Yeah. That's huge, right? Yeah. I mean, like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember when you all explained this to me the first time. I was like, "Oh, wow, that is actually insane." Like it is actually insanely good. The idea that you are now like using a piece in your deck to say like, no, 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 we're here on the same side. I'm giving you a counter spell back, and then you also get to subtly like pick up a piece of your own. But that's, I mean, it's just like the classic like, oh, I'm gonna intuition, I'm gonna get a counter spell to stop my opponent winning, but I'm also gonna bin two pieces I want in the graveyard that are my combo pieces. I think that's a really really cool play pattern to have that card.
So one thing, like later on, you might talk about a specific piece that I will talk about this theory more, which is
Sure.
fundamental deck building flaws.
Okay.
A lot of people, when talking about Tayam, call out the fact that, oh, we're commander centric or we're in these colors,
Yeah.
but that is a flawed mentality locked on the basis of what you can usually do.
Okay. Interesting.
But if there's a so if there's a solution, you should use that solution regardless of the cost to your deck if it
Mm.
fixes a fundamental flaw, which is the fact that we're in Upsun, yet Skullwinder gives us a counter spell.
Yeah.
So we get access to counter spells.
Yeah. That's super interesting.
Okay, now I can talk about our length package.
Okay.
So what you can notice is that we're basically a land, not tribal, but we're a land deck.
Yeah.
If you go over to lands, it's not that we're on 32 lands, it's on that we're 32 very specific lands.
Okay.
It's extremely tight usually. So let's say there's a Dranith,
Yeah.
we have command beacon.
Yep.
So we don't we don't remove the Dranith, we get command beacon out.
I love that.
We're also a heavy Cradle deck. We have a high consistency to get Cradle.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a counterspell represented, we can get Cavern of Souls. What you can do with the combination of Current Ranger, and if you get Yavin Maya, you can, with the Knight of the Reliquary, you can sacrifice a forest, get Boseiju, untap the Knight of the Reliquary, sacrifice Boseiju, get Petrified Field, sacrifice Petrified Field to return Boseiju into your hand,
Mm.
which essentially turns your Knight of the Reliquary into a Nature's Claim.
Huh. Okay. Very interesting.
And so with the Knight of the Reliquary, plus combination of, you're going to probably ask later on, all of these land tutors access the same facet,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
all of these great utility lands
Mm-hmm.
plus Cradle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm I've been thanks to Charles mostly, I've been a huge Weathered Wayfarer stand for a long time. So I have I can definitely see how effective that is. One card I'm a very big fan of in here is the fact that y'all are on Hex Drinker, which is I think awesome. It's the fact that it's just because I remember I think it was when I was playing that Mox Masters game against the three Tayams. Hex Drinker was one of those cards that came down, and if we didn't counter it, would have just absolutely run away with the game because someone was starved on counters, and then the Hex Drinker came down and was able to be like pump 3 mana into it, go off, just because that becomes suddenly you have 3 mana, you have I guess 6 mana Tayam activation, which sounds like a lot, but when the board state was as stalled out as it was, 6 mana Tayam activation is totally fine.
So Hexdrinker is a great segue
Mm-hmm.
into another there's like literally hundreds of these small deck building theories that
Yeah.
all really come together. With Tayam, what you need to think about in terms of infinites is that don't think about cards as individuals. Think of them as mathematical equations.
Okay.
Hexdrinker is the cleanest conversion ratio from mana to counters.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you don't need to dump 6 mana to get an activation.
Yeah.
What you usually need to do is dump 1 or 2 mana to
Yeah.
get your first activation.
That makes sense.
Because your each activation returns another resource that will give you another activation. So if you activate Tayam and then you get a creature, there are like 40 creatures in the deck, there's a high consistency for it,
They come
you
with a
will get
vigilance
another counter.
Yeah, exactly.
So with Hexdrinker, put 2-3 mana into it, you might get 2 activations from that. Not gonna lie, a 6/6 Progenitus is as much of a good of a win condition.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it does work. I've seen that card pop off as well. Heck yeah. All right. Going down here, I think we covered a lot of the things people might have questions on as far as those are concerned. Any specific reason for Beast Within over other options in that slot, or just, do you like the flexibility?
So with Tayam, you can essentially, like I've talked about a lot of these card choices, because the conversion ratios are so high on a lot of cards,
Yeah.
you can practically deck build your deck in any way, and that's why it's a lot of scatterbrained ideas. And then it's like, oh yeah, we're on Beast Within. So Beast Within is better than Assassin's Trophy and Abrupt Decay because you can Beast Within your own tournament.
Okay.
So yeah, you can Beast Within your own Cradle to loop it.
Yeah.
And you get a 3/3 Beast with a Vigilance counter.
Yeah, yeah.
And your Undying creature, you will get 3 counters because the +1 Vigilance and Vigilance.
Yeah, Vigilance counter, +1 counter, and the Vigilance and the Beast. Okay, yeah, that's all really interesting. Super flexible piece here. And as you mentioned, the deck cares about lands a lot, so Expedition Map, huge one there. Next one I think that's really interesting is the Nature's Chosen. What is that in there?
Okay, so Nature's Chosen is like one of the best green cards that we've discovered. The card is absolutely unfair, quite frankly, because let's say you have a expedition map, you get Cradle, you have Tayam out.
Yeah.
You tap Cradle for, let's say, a simple 5.
Yeah.
You use one of those 5s to play Nature's Chosen.
Okay, 4
Now now you tap Tayam to untap your Cradle. Then you untap Tayam. Then you tap your and then you put the mana into something like an activation.
Yeah.
And then on your next opponent's turn, you tap Cradle and then you untap Cradle. So what your on Nature's Chosen essentially gave you is roughly 10 mana in that situation.
Yeah, no, that's insane. That is actually very, very good. Okay, it makes a ton of sense. Yeah, that's why is this card not talked about more?
Truly do not know. There's a lot of cards here that.
Yeah. So, and with Hunting Ground specifically, I assume just because how easy it is to get Threshold in this deck is kind of makes it worth it.
So this is the card that I presumed you were gonna ask when I talked about fixing fundamental deck building flaws.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the flaws in Tayam is the fact that, well, we pull cards from our library into our graveyard and cards from our graveyard onto the battlefield.
Yeah.
We have no access to cards from our hand.
Yeah.
Which means usually we just lose games to a bounce spell on our Rule of Law, and then we can't do anything about it. We can't get it back.
Okay.
And Hunting Grounds fixes that fundamental flaw of if our cards get bounced, we just put it back with the Hunting Grounds.
Okay, cool.
Also some pretty nuts lines with the Ranger and Recruiter. You can essentially, with a Tayam activation, you can put any 2 toughness creature onto the battlefield with the Hunting Grounds.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I guess now I'd rather talk about some cards that aren't in the deck that people might instinctively think about. The first one I noticed is the I know some people have traditionally played Swift reconfiguration combos in the list, and I know it doesn't quite work the way people want it to, and I'd like it to cover that.
Yes, please. It is a scourge on us that people come ask why aren't we running SV3
Yeah,
configuration.
yeah,
It's because Devoted Druid is an artifact,
yeah,
and Tayam doesn't remove counters from permanents, it removes counters from creatures, and
right.
then you might say, what if you just grow the Devoted Druid? Well, it's get
And then it
literally
dies.
Thanos
Yeah.
snapped to state-based actions.
Yeah, exactly. So just yeah, to be clear, it just dies. Like nothing happens. It's dead. So hence why no inclusion in this list. Now, Aura Shards is a card I'm actually kind of interested in. Obviously, just a very good value card, right? But it's just not usually played in cEDH. Why the inclusion here?
Another deck building theory
Mm-hmm.
is like fundamental card building slots.
Yeah,
Now these might be conserved in other lists to win conditions, counter spells, removal, stuff
yeah,
like that.
yeah,
And in Tayam, there's collectively agreed upon roughly 1 to 2 card slots, which go to basically if things go to hell, you want something to break through of that. If
yeah,
there's a rest in peace, curse totem, and a craft diggers,
yeah.
no singular piece could get rid of that
Yep, makes sense.
except Aura Shards.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect
So,
sense. Yeah, the only other thing I can think of is like a Bane of Progress, but then that kills all of your stacks pieces too.
and Aura Shards breaks is I've had a lot of games where I've just started breaking everyone's permanents or artifacts.
So I know historically some other Tayam lists have been on the Shieldmate combo, or some other sort of pump effects that will pump a devoted druid and basically allow you to pop off with your commander and then devoted druid and some sort of pump spell. Is there a reason that you and your brother have omitted that from your version of the list?
Yeah. So when we started this list 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
what we discovered, our like I can describe our first infinite that was not even noticed in the deck. It
Yeah,
was literally Devoted Druid,
yeah,
Earthcraft,
yeah.
Land Enchantment, and Yoraka the Tree Speaker.
Okay,
And that's when we got hooked on Tayam. Because
okay,
we found out that Devoted Druid goes infinite with realistically everything,
okay.
and it does not need you to run these conserved singular function pieces.
Okay, yeah. So back to what we talked about, like sort of earlier in this episode, just the card quality issue, right?
Yeah, like some might say we're in Upson, but what I'm saying is that we are in Upson.
Mm-hmm.
We're not Grixis. We're not gonna play our Underworld Bridge. What
Right.
we need to do is play into our creatures and what we do best,
Okay.
which is stacks.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Any other cards in the considering board? Oh, actually, this is one I wanted to talk about. Monogorkar Hydra. That one seems like to me instinctively like a card that makes a lot of sense. Why has it been omitted?
So again, talking about like dedicated card slots,
Yeah.
there's a few dedicated card slots for non-tutored counter generators,
Yeah.
which is a slot dedicated to a piece like the Hex Drinker, which is
Mm-hmm.
you're not tutoring for it.
Yeah.
It just adds more consistency to
Yeah.
hit through your activations in case you
Absolutely.
don't hit your rangers
Yeah.
and recruiters. The problem with Monogorkar Hydra is that it's kind of the worst one
Mm-hmm.
out of everything else.
Okay.
If we, for example, look at Hexdrinker. Hexdrinker is the best conversion
Yeah.
from mana to counters.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Scurry Oak is whenever, if you can hit a creature from your activation
Yeah.
that evolves it, you get 3 counters,
Mm-hmm.
which is the +1 vigilance from the scroll and the vigilance with the creature that
Yeah.
entered.
Yeah.
So that's more explosive because each activation, as long as you can hit a specific creature,
Yeah.
you can get counters for your next activation.
Okay.
And then you look at Monogorkar Hydra again, and we just kind of ask, what does it do?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense for sure. What about Solitude? That one seems like a just a solid piece.
So, like, as just standard deck building, it's just
Mm-hmm.
the fact that we like to keep our converted mana cost low because
Three
we
under.
just
Yeah.
can't. Yeah. But honestly, Solitude probably isn't bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, again, you can realistically build Tayam in a lot of ways that
Yeah, yeah.
we haven't even considered yet.
Yeah. It definitely seems like a deck that like uh they could print one weird counter card and completely change the list. And also, it seems like a deck that, people could easily just go, oh, hey, this interaction makes a lot of sense. I didn't think about this obscure card that was a common from 20 years ago, right? So I definitely can see that this deck having the potential to just like be secretly broken without people noticing it, on top of the fact that it's already really solid.
Well, I don't know if you saw the new Nisha Resurgent spoiler.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the new Lotus Cobra.
Yeah.
And if you take a fetch land with Tayam,
Yeah.
you can hit Endurance because it's an elemental,
Yeah.
and Solitude is also an elemental,
Right.
which means that if you hit a fetch, you can literally draw Solitude, which is removal.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's pretty insane.
yeah, and that's another facet that we should look at.
Yeah.
Sadly, we just don't have that much time to
Yeah. Yeah.
look at
There's
every
so many
single
pieces.
card. Yeah.
Is there a reason you're not running Sanctum Prelate? That one sticks out to me as like a card that feels like it makes a lot of sense.
Like these are actually like really good questions. Yeah, Sanctum Prelate is, if we think about the list,
Yeah.
we're a control list, which
Yeah.
means we're reactive. We're reacting to our opponents developing the board.
Mhm.
And if we take back Sanctum, that is a proactive piece to stop our opponents from developing.
Okay.
It's good. You can definitely play it. It's
Yeah.
just that you want to keep your cards reactive rather than proactive.
Okay. Cool. That's very interesting.
A few things like that come to mind is like game theory wise
Yeah.
is there is essentially what you should be playing for is, I don't remember the correct wording, might be potential energy in
Okay.
like actual mathematics. And what
Yeah.
you need to think about is potential resources.
Yeah.
If you have let's say a devoted druid out and you have 4 counters
Yeah.
and your devoted druid doesn't have a -1, that's 2 activations.
Yeah.
Because you're taking a counter
Off the
and
devoted druid. Yeah.
yeah, and you need to just kind of, it's really weird to describe time because you essentially need to listen to what the deck shows you.
Mm-hmm.
Like you fundamentally need to not tunnel vision. You need to really just look at what resources you're getting
Yeah.
and what resources you're putting in, and that way you actually familiarize yourself with more of the potential infinites.
Yeah. So I like to describe to people who, when I'm going over mulligans, there's this idea that like you not only need to look at your resources, but like what those resources can lead to. Not only do you go like, okay, I have a good hand here. It has some fast mana. It's like, but what do you actually do with that? Do you play your commander turn one? Do you tutor? Do you play a Ristic Study? In this deck, it's a little bit different, right? Like your tutor we talked about on turn one. Is that a wall of roots? Is this something that you can do to get your engine online right away? You might have some fast mana, but is it enough to actually be able to play your commander on the turn you wanted to with an activation? I have counter spells, but do I have anything to proactively move my board state along? And it seems like this deck, as we talked about, it's a complicated list. And this deck says, hey, not only do we have these restrictions, but we need to be able to push further. We need to be able to take this planning that we would do during the mulligan stage of the game and it say, no, we need to actually have this level of planning throughout the game as well.
If one thing to also describe is tempo.
Yeah.
A lot of cEDH decks plays usually on tempos of 1 to 2, which is they develop their mana and then they play their payoff.
Yeah.
We're playing on tempo of 3, which is tutor for wall, play Tayam, which means that we're usually one tempo behind and we need to have a game plan to keep that going.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts? I feel like we've done a lot of covering of the important stuff in this deck. Anything you want to say to people who are interested in the list? Anything to cover? Things like that?
Once again, like, please come ask questions.
Yeah.
It may sound like we did cover a lot of good ground.
Honestly,
probably didn't talk about half of the things that should be mentioned. The deck has, again, hundreds of theories, hundreds of personal card choices that you could run, and it's really easy to A, tunnel vision, B, fall into these standard cEDH pitfalls, which is the staples. You should be more focused on what the deck actually does rather than what the deck should do as a standard of cEDH.
I love that. I love that, and that's something I subscribe to with deck building in general. It's like not just worrying about like what are good cEDH cards, but what are those cards that are going to make my deck as competitive as possible. And I've seen it happen so many times with really innovative deck building. They take the normal stuff and they say, "Yeah, this is really good in this deck, but right now I'm talking about this commander." And it's the most unique part about commander. And when it comes to a deck like Tayam, that is super unique, has a lot of strange requirements. It requires you to think outside of the box a good amount, and I think you covered it perfectly there.
I mean, yeah, I could go on, but
Yeah,
I think we've covered a lot of the most important parts.
hell yeah. All right. So, thank you, Pixel, so much for coming on to the show. As I mentioned before, we will have the link to the Tayam Discord down in the description of this video. I know for a fact I'm jumping in there as soon as this video ends, and or I might already be in there, but I might reprioritize where it is on my Discord. I'm in so many Discords, but yeah, I love this deck, and I've loved it for a long time. I've had a nice shiny Tayam sitting in my binder forever, and I've just been waiting for literally an excuse like this to sleeve this deck up. So I'm very excited about it. I hope to be able to maybe to make a deep run with it pretty soon. That's the hope. We'll see how much I actually get done with it. But seriously, thank you so much for volunteering your time to come do this. And it sounds like there's a lot of resources for this deck available, and a lot of people really willing to help, and that's awesome. If you are interested in learning more about this deck, as I mentioned, that will be down in the description below. I'd love to hear people in the audience's thoughts about this list. It's super cool. It's super unique. I'd love to hear if anyone's played the deck, if anyone has any cool pieces. And also shout out in the comments down below, everyone. I'd love for y'all to thank Pixel for showing up and explaining a bunch of this stuff, because it is not an easy deck. And Pixel, it's like 3 in the morning for you at this point, right?
Yeah, it is coming to 4 a.m. and I'm
Yeah.
feeling good.
So honestly, the devotion that people have for the list they care about is so cool, and thank you so much for volunteering your time to come do this. So leave those comments down below. Thank you, Pixel, and make sure y'all leave your thoughts on the deck. Let me know any spicy pieces you might have seen in Tayam lists you played against, anything like that. And anyone else from the Tayam Discord, make sure to show it up below. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear any spicy one-ups you might be playing, stuff like that. Also, everybody, if you like content like this, please make sure to let me know. Leave that like, hit that subscribe button. It helps out a ton, and I'm always looking to promote unique cEDH decks and cover decks that the format is not always willing to just throw in your face and say this is the best stuff, and this is a perfect deck for it. I think there are people who, just like Winota back in the day, who will look at a deck like this and say this is garbage, and it's far from that. It's a deck that people are consistently performing with. It's a deck that is super unique, has super unique play patterns, and is just difficult, and that's cool. I know there's so many people who will take a theory like that this deck is tough to play, and take that as a challenge, and I'm so excited to hear about people playing this deck more. Also, if you enjoy content like this, it helps to go over to patreon.com/comedianmtg. Every dollar helps the channel so much. I know right now the coaching tier for the channel is down at the current moment, and that's just because I'm updating the rates to reflect how much my normal coaching is actually, and I have to rebuild this whole thing. So it's down at the current moment, but as I mentioned a couple times now, come June, the channel is getting a lot of TLC, because I am going to be taking the entire summer to be focusing on this channel, focusing on giving you guys more content, adding YouTube shorts, hopefully moving to multiple videos a week, all of that stuff. So if that stuff is interesting to you, make sure to check out patreon.com/comedianmtg, because the more support we can get during that time, during this summer, the more likelihood that I can keep pumping out content for y'all, and the closer I will be able to be doing this in a way that will be closer to my regular job. So if you like the channel, it's a great time to start supporting that. And as I mentioned, about halfway through June, after I move, things are going to get crazy, and I'm going to be focusing on the channel a ton. Thank you all for watching. And shout out to, once again, our affiliate Dragonshield sleeves. Dragonshield, I love the product. I use them all the time. It's what I use for all my cEDH decks, and they're a fantastic product. And there's a link down below that helps out the channel, as well as gets you some pretty nice sleeves. And on top of that, we are also ambassadors for Monarch Media. We don't have any events to announce at the current moment, but I can tell you with confidence that there are some really cool projects coming up. Monarch is a fantastic service. They help with these videos. It's a company I'm very excited to be working with in the future, and as soon as I have some hot cEDH events for y'all, I will make sure you know. Pixel, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome, everybody. Catch you next time. Peace.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got